Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of TA Tech Unboxed, the podcast and video cast that is chatting to the people behind the tools that we use every day in the TA and HR community. Each week we are not only chatting to the founders and the people behind the products, but we're also hosting a live demo of their products on the YouTube channel. There'll be a link in the description somewhere if they're capable of sharing one with us. Wink to those of you that haven't done it so far. We're trying to build the biggest repository out there for TA and HR leaders. So if you've got any suggestions, don't forget in comment, let us know. I'm Chris Haslam, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Darren Bush. Mr. Darren Bush, how are you?
Busy is what I'll say. Yeah, all good. Yeah, how you been?
Février. I don't know what March is in French, but yes, they seem to be getting busier, don't they? Busier for like lots of reasons, like marketing and like cool stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like fun stuff I like doing. The deal cycles are definitely slower.
I was going to say, because the beginning of the year, right? It was all January. I remember kicking off with loads of people leaving the open to work banner. There was a lot of activity there. February, maybe so much. I've not seen so much in March.
As in activating open to work banners or removing them?
Or removing them.
Yeah, interesting. Definitely seen the same. Definitely seen the same. I definitely think there is a movement in the world at the minute. I think we are starting to see talent folks getting sucked up a little bit more, and I think that's a really good sign for economies. Yeah, I really do think that I'm seeing some movement. I'm not seeing everyone out of, typically folks are on shorter contracts or teams are trying to grow with a little bit more flexibility in mind, right? Which is takes us on really nicely to our guests today. Although we're not going to intro them just yet, but mobility and talent mobility within businesses is a really difficult challenge, right? Particularly with what we've gone through in the last couple of years. How do you guys deal with mobility internally? Do you have a scheme?
So we do have, and we were launching other schemes as well. We call like the gig marketplace, where people can go and do can do projects, I would say, but we don't really have a secondment. I mean, we do have like pockets of people doing secondments. We're doing obviously a rotation program we're launching in the early careers. Hopefully in May, everyone will be joining. But yeah, it's done in pockets and it's done in silos.
We've all got to be. I think this is a good area like we've all got to be better at, isn't it? It's like as a smaller business, as what we consider ourselves to be startup or scale up. We definitely want folks, like it's cool that you're talking about the gig economy internally. It's like we definitely want folks to drop in and write some content for the website or help us with some value propositions or sell or, market the business 100%, but yet they're not been bought in for those particular areas, right? So I think talent mobility, but like making sure you're using the people that you have to their capacity is really important for not just the business but for the individual, right? I want to be working. I want to get stuff out of work. I want to, so I think it's really important. And who do we have on today's show, Darren?
So today, Chris, we've got our largest panel that we've ever had on TA Tech Unboxed. We have Dave, Hector, and Suzy from Ditto. Welcome to the show.
Woo!
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And for as well, for anyone listening later, Suzy is only here for 25 minutes and then she'll be dropping off. So
I'm so sorry in advance.
It's all good. So we normally kick off with a little bit about you guys. Do you want to do some intros?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. So Dave, CEO and 1/3 of the founding team at Ditto. Over a decade working in HR, specifically talent acquisition. Majority of my career was working at Dyson, most notably leading the function globally by the end, which was a huge honor. Briefly worked for the BBC and did some cool talent transformation stuff there. And then met Suzy and Hector and kicked off Ditto.
Heck, you go next. I'll go last.
Nice. So I'm Hector. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Ditto. So my background's a bit of a mix. Started off in construction, worked on things like the Elizabeth line, moved into sort of tech consulting and project consulting, and the last few years have been essentially delivering tech products in kind of the London tech scene, pretty much. So yeah. And then last year, met Dave and Suzy at an incubator and started our thing, which is amazing.
And last but obviously not least, I'm Suzy. So lovely to meet you all. So my background is management consulting. So I used to work at BAE, worked there for 5 years. And across that whole time, I worked in government. So I worked in multiple departments doing kind of product and strategy transformation work. Kind of got bored of the red tape and the bureaucracy. So quit my job and joined an incubator and met these two. And that's me.
Dream team. Dream team. So what we normally do is go through our guests' like history a little bit. We're going to approach this slightly differently today because I think it'd be cool to talk about the incubator. You gave us a couple of really good stories of the problems that you guys solve at that particular point, and you've all come from completely different backgrounds, but represent each part of the product and its journey, right? So do you mind just telling us a little bit about that? I don't know who I'm going to point at.
Yeah, it's the start. I'm curious about what's the incubator, and like who came to the incubator first, or did you all come from different areas and then you just kind of grouped together?
Yeah, good. It's a good question. I famously love telling this story, as Suzy and Hector well know. So I'll start, and then you can color in the details that I miss. But I think you kind of summarized the route in nicely. We all have different backgrounds, and we all landed there for weirdly similar reasons. If you've watched Love Island and you've watched The Apprentice, bang them both together, and you're not a million miles away from what an incubator feels like. And we as a three found that we were hanging out with each other in between meeting everybody else on the cohort, and there's 70 plus people. But you get told to look out for certain team dynamics and opposing skill sets, and there's lots of methodology behind what a founding team should and could look like. We broke a lot of those rules, if I'm being honest. We dialed up chemistry as our most important kind of link, and we actually had a meeting, very hilarious morning. We went in early. We were sharing our kind of lists of who we liked and who we thought was really impressive and who would maybe weirded us out a little bit, as you do normally. And we had a go, no-go meeting where we said, let's prove we shouldn't be a team. And we went into a meeting room. We anonymously wrote our unfair advantages, our passions, our interests, the problems that we'd faced in our careers. And in that meeting, we landed on the model of secondments. We landed on the metaphor of football teams loaning players. And Ditto was quite literally born in that meeting, and we haven't looked back.
I mean, that's pretty cool. There's so many questions in there, but that's pretty cool. So you get in a room, you unpack stuff. That's a clever way of describing, which we'll get into later, the Ditto solution of it starting there. Was I assume that wasn't the only validation moment that you guys had, not only that you were a great team together, but that this is a problem in the world, right? So was that the moment, or is it? I assume there's several others. Because also I remember, Dave, your Dyson days are not far out of Brexit and the talk of Dyson leaving the UK.
Yeah, so I moved to Singapore when we moved HQ to Singapore,
right,
and lived out there for a while, and then came back, and I was still at Dyson during COVID. Yeah, to kind of answer your question a little bit further, I think we all came, Hector from startup world, Suzy from public sector, me from corporate, but we all had a long list of problems. And the first thing you learn in any incubator is to think in problems and not in solutions. And that's actually weirdly hard to do when you aren't from the world of startup. And we'd all experienced sort of themes through our careers, whether that was, and again, I start leaning into the solution that we're doing now, but whether that's the inability for a company to be flexible with their workforce, the inability for a company to offer great variety and development, democratizing opportunity, who should get to go and do certain things and who shouldn't and why and who decides. Before we got to Ditto, we talked about, I mean, a huge list of problems. But Suzy, Hector, I mean, there's an obvious reason why I think we landed on the one that we did, and that's probably more linked to our passion to solve that problem. But yeah, it was a weird few weeks of just listing loads of problems that we'd all run into in our very different careers.
So many great
I was gonna
ideas
ask-
have born.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, Darren, go on.
Did you all come with like different ideas at the time though? When you join an incubator, surely in an incubator you've got an idea yourself and you want to drive that. So it's three of you all come on essentially with different ideas, and then did you just merge your ideas together, or did it just kind of build on top and actually you realize this is something Ditto is what you want to do?
We're going to lose you, Suzy, in 10, 15 minutes, right? So let's make sure we get a couple of answers out of you.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll take this one if you want. And Heck, I know you've got a good
Sorry.
so feel free to jump in. Yeah, no, it's okay. So it's interesting. We all came in with an idea. So I'm pretty sure Dave had like a really solid deck that he was showing lots of people, which actually
was terrible.
It was
was so bad.
And then Heck had a really good idea for the construction industry.
Can we share the ideas?
Yeah, go on, Dave. What was yours?
Oh God, you've done okay. Mine was solving workforce planning, and it was a platform that allowed you to plug in your growth and your attrition and your headcount, and it would essentially then plug into a co-pilot that would sit along all of your recruitment teams and tell them, great job, you're on track, or you're under, or this metric is off, or this metric is on. So it essentially, ironically, automated my old job as a manager of recruitment teams, and I think actually great product, not a particularly large market, potentially quite niche.
Then Heck, you go. Yours was completely different.
Yeah, it was. I mean, so much of my experience is like in the weird fringes between like tech and the construction industry. So the idea that I came in with and that I initially pitched to Antler that got me a position in the cohort was kind of a sort of AI co-pilot for building designers. So for architects and civil engineers and structural engineers, a co-pilot that as you're designing and creating the structure, etc., it's checking and making sure that your maths are right and your structures are correct and it's not going to fall down and you're not creating clashes, essentially. So that was the idea I came in with, and obviously pivoted quite drastically from there.
I'm seeing, though, some synergies.
Yeah.
Some alignment. And Suzy, what was yours?
Yeah, it's funny actually, because if you kind of shove all of these together, there's kind of a unique little bit that comes out of them, which kind of is where we landed. So I've always been a huge fan of the shared economy. I love every clothes rental app. I love Airbnb. I love WeWork. I love everything that's got to hold and use. So I came in with the idea of we need to make the shared economy more relatable to Gen Z and millennials and make it more kind of friendly on the bank account. So renting an outfit, just wanted to find some sort of incentive plan to like ensure that people would start doing those things a bit more, rather than buying a t-shirt from Shein, for example, which is completely not my industry, but I was really keen to do something in the shared economy just because I loved the variety of consulting, very much almost a shared economy within the workplace. And then weirdly, we kind of landed on secondments, which in its own way is almost like the Airbnb of talent. So that's
a valid proposition if I've ever heard one.
Yeah. Do you want to explain that to people obviously listening now? What is Ditto? What do you do?
Yeah, of course. You want me to take this on, both? So Ditto is the secondments marketplace and it enables organizations to borrow or loan their permanent workforce, and that's through secondments. So for example, if you wanted to upskill an employee in a certain area or allow them the opportunity to go to a certain industry and try and do something different for a little bit and kind of upskill in almost cross-pollinating thought, you might loan out an employee and have their full salary reimbursed for that time. Or you might choose to borrow an employee in, so highly vouched for, hugely talented employee from another organization, 20% cheaper than a contractor. So we're kind of bringing the shared economy to the workforce.
Wow.
I love the idea, by the way.
Yes,
great.
Super smart.
Yeah.
Like it's really clever. We literally were talking about this as part of our intro, which our listeners of course get to hear. It's like it's not an easy solution, right? Particularly in this current climate where we're seeing folks unfortunately being let go frequently. that are you guys seeing this as a? I've got some dumb questions as well, just to before we move on. I've got some dumb questions to make sure we fully understand. But are you guys seeing this sort of as an answer to what we've seen in the last couple of years? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, certainly a big part of our supply, the sort of the bit of the marketplace where we're getting candidates, a lot of the inbounds that we're getting certainly is from customers who are saying, we have this great team and we're fairly certain we're going to need them when the market picks up again. We've got lots of kind of long running bids or long running jobs, but right now, just in terms of having a bench, just in terms of being in a down market, just in terms of the cost of people burning a hole in your pocket, we just can't afford to pay them. We want to nurture them. We're really keen on their development, but we also can't having them sit around and not learning is also a real problem. And so we do get quite a lot of customers who come to us and say, "Can you send our guys into the comment? What sort of interesting development opportunities do you have?" And that's a big part of kind of where we're getting the supply side of our market from right now.
What's the typical duration they would say? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months that they're looking to learn out?
Yeah, I mean, 6 months is sort of the average, but we get requests for all sorts. We get 12 months, we get 3 months, but fractional. Thankfully, our platform and our contracts are all built in a quite a customizable way, so we can meet any of these needs. And there's almost certainly always someone on the other side looking for the resource. But yeah, I think full time 6 months seems to be the most common right now.
So, dumb questions. I want my team to further develop. Platform sits in the middle. I let you guys know. What happens then? Are you guys vetting the candidates, the people, that are from my business? So you vet them for their skills, and then they sit on a marketplace. I haven't, by the way, to any listener here, I haven't had a demo. If I'm getting this right, I haven't seen the demo yet, right? So if it's so that's it. So they sit in this kind of middleware, this bit in the middle. Great, and then me as a business, I come on and I say I want to hire a super handsome talent acquisition leader called Darren, and that's led huge teams before, and you're able to come and pair me with so fascinating. Is there a particular team that it's like you're seeing lots of people wanting to share in the platform? I assume you've got lots of great data around this kind of stuff.
Who wants to jump in?
You go for it.
Go for it. Oh, so I think yes, there is some emerging trends. And sadly, at the moment, I think we have to say no to more than we say yes to. We're building a marketplace for tech talent, and we know that tech talent lands and it has an immediate impact on a business. So software engineers, AI engineers, cyber, data analysts, project managers, program managers, those work really well. But we get inbounds, to do retail, to do blue collar seasonal workers. A very, very cool future use case for us is cyclical businesses that flex down every year for 6 months, and currently they just let people go. Actually, they could be doing something entirely different.
Maybe they're on 0 hours currently and don't need to be in future. Right, cool. Is this? Are you seeing it as a is it also a possible revenue stream for businesses like that?
Yeah, you could see it that way. We kind of like to put the employee at the core of what we do in our offerings. So we love that our employees are loving the secondment, love the upskilling opportunity, love the variety. So for us, we're very much employee first. You want to engage, retain, and look after your employee. That should be the reason why you do a secondment more than anything. But we can't ignore the benefit it brings to kind of workforce agility, that rather than letting these people go, you could actually have their costs reimbursed for the time that they're away.
Is there a concern that some companies are worried about their staff going there full time? That they'll work there for 6 months. Do you hear that a lot? So, I feel like it might be better over there, or they might really enjoy it, or a better team. Does that question come up a lot?
Yeah, we get that pushback fairly often. We have a 12-month non-compete built into our contracts, which is as enforceable as these things tend to be. I think there's a sort of answer to that, which is, if your employee wants to leave, there's not a huge amount you could do to stop them, and maybe you wouldn't actually want to stop them because they're following their journey, they're going to another place, they're having a different experience, and that's okay. certainly from our our early sales and our early secondments and the data that we've gathered, the vast majority of employees come back. They expect it to be a small stint, a learning opportunity, and then they bring their skill set back. But there will be a small number of people who go through this secondment and end up leaving the company that they've been sent from. But that's sort of partly the risk you take in sending someone on secondment, I think.
I think to build on that, I think there's like a lag answer as well, where we say, well, the alternative is, maybe don't offer the development and the secondment opportunity, but then in 3, 6, 9 months time, will they still be working with you then? So there's almost we think they might go anyway. This is an amazing kind of red carpet opportunity to allow them to live out a personal, desire that they've had in a different sector, to broaden horizons back at home. But as Hector says, it's like a very pragmatic question, but more of a perceived problem rather than an actual problem, because the data suggests it's like 5% of the time that would actually happen, that they would go.
I mean, I see this as a kind of a no-brainer, though. Every time a company for companies that are dipping down, rather than going through the structuring and reducing workforce, it's like the first point of call is go to Ditto, and I potentially put 200, 500 people on a program, and then 6, 12 months time reassess whether we're bouncing back and they can come back. You're kind of like, it's like the boomerang in some ways, sort of a mini boomerang, sort of. If they do
I guess what it's
you can always have them on your file.
Particularly when you've had, like, if folks are only coming to Ditto that are about to release folks. I mean, I know that's how we came on to this subject, right? To circle back to that, it's like, if you are only coming on it to release folks. So you guys, like, you said you were focusing it around the human beings, right? The people in the process. So if you're hearing people say, we're going to ditch them if you can't help us, is that a red flag for you guys? I mean, of course you can help in the interim, but
yeah, it's the opposite. Yeah, because think about what that says. So their employers called us and they're willing to pay a fee in order to retain and develop their best people.
Yeah,
so it's one of those weird, again, we do get that a lot. And then when we answer it, it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of obvious. But yeah, no, it's not a red flag. It's kind of the exact opposite.
The point.
Yeah.
So there's two markets. Sorry, Suzy, you go.
No, I was just going to say the whole point is exactly as Dave said, those people come back. So this is an option on the table to keep your best people rather than let them go. So when we get that call, it's, if they wanted to make them redundant, they'd make them redundant. We're not, why would they just kick the can down the road for 6 months? So for us, it's very much this is something that somebody they really want to keep. And there's purpose behind it.
Right, yeah. You've got the purpose behind it in the beginning. Otherwise, don't come to Ditto. All right. I mean, it's like you're building in a space where there isn't anything at the moment, right? Bar the loan system for players.
The craziest thing I find, and I think, like, I should say, like, in my former life, I watched a very big team get made redundant, and then I watched that same team double in size within 6 months. And I remember thinking, like, this is kind of mad. And then I stepped back and I was like, okay, well, let's think about this. This is happening a lot. So let's have a look at what options are available to companies and leaders today. And when you look at it objectively, it's crazy that in 2024, the best, most mature companies in the world will plan who they think is going to quit. Like, they will hope that a certain percentage of people from certain functions will leave in order to model strategic workforce planning. And if that doesn't happen, you essentially are presented with a couple of options, and I would argue none of them are particularly positive. One is offer people the opportunity to leave the business, voluntary redundancy, manage them out, pretty dark thing to do, or make them redundant. And it's a strange realization that in 2024, there's 1,000 ways to flex the workforce up, but there's not a single positive one to flex a permanent workforce and its costs down. So I think we're possibly the first one.
Yeah, I think, from my memory, I haven't seen anything else in the market. I've definitely heard people talk about it, but that's great that you've actually gone out and created like Chris has said, or with Dave about a loan-based system that we have very much on a football or sports market. We don't have obviously in the traditional knowledge worker market.
I like it because it's almost an answer to freelance hiring also, because, you know, I think a lot of people enter that market. Forgive me, every freelancer I've ever placed, by the way, for the next word to come out of my mouth. But often, I think as a freelancer, there's an expectation, right? They are an expert at the peak of their market, and they need to deliver quickly, or they're going to upset a load of folks. You can't come and learn as a freelancer. You're in as an expert. There isn't really anything else. So you often get freelancers that maybe aren't strong enough to be freelance, but because the money's there or there's demand, you get a part of the market that isn't probably capable, and that freelance market then gets overinflated when those people should really have stayed and again been on a development pathway, which it seems like you guys are solving, right, with this particular with your product.
We're at time with Suzy, so I don't know if you any more final thing you want to say before you go.
Other than, exactly that, Chris. So versus a freelancer, we're 20% cheaper. So I'll let Hector and Dave jump in on that and give you a bit more detail.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye,
Steve. I was just going to say, there's a sort of an interesting point around that sort of development of when you're relatively junior that I think you kind of touched on there in the sort of freelancer space of developing and learning and as you go. I mean, one of the things that kind of, I don't know, connected us early on was that we've had quite varied careers. I mean, if you look at my LinkedIn, I've done about a dozen different jobs, all for the reason of, you know, having that kind of squiggly career and constantly learning and moving through industries. And I guess my career is sort of the archetype of that. And I think secondments are done a little bit in the construction industry for that purpose, to give you those development opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get without leaving. And so that was sort of part of one of the reasons why we wanted to start something like this is to give employees a different option where they could do stints in other industries and 6 months or 3 months of, you know, working in a startup or working in a really large corporation or working in a charity or whatever that may be, to have that very varied career and therefore get all that on the job learning, but without, you know, having to constantly quit as I've had to have done.
With you, and it doesn't not exist. There are businesses like I'm just sitting there thinking, actually, this is what my business is. Secondments. I put my talent teams on site with our customers, and they get that varied. But and everyone is now starting. I notice in my company, from a traditional recruitment agency or maybe being internal, they're liking being here because of that variety and the learning experiences they get in other places. So you're taking the best of the secondment world, the negatives of the freelance economy that sometimes causes an issue, and then I love that. I mean, that's a real, like, I'm sure you got a Venn diagram for this somewhere.
we do. I've made one of those, but it is absolutely true. I mean, the construction industry is a classic example where the margins are so thin. You can't be sitting on the bench. You can't be a civil engineer just sitting around. And my whole grad scheme, you know, it wasn't a structured 6 months here, 6 months there. It was, we did 8 months on this and then the project ended and we have to send you somewhere, but we don't have any work. So you're spending 12 months on the Elizabeth line and you go, okay, like, you don't get a choice. You're just sent off. But the expectation is you're always going to be learning in whatever you're sent to do. And almost all industries just don't have this. And almost all companies don't have the connections or relationships to actually enable this for their employees. So it's a very industry specific, company specific, ad hoc thing. And we would love to, you know, give it to everyone. We think that it's an amazing model. It's just, you know, who you know.
Yeah. Do you able to share maybe a standout example where where it's worked with a company or an individual employee, what they got from it?
Yeah, I mean, one of our earliest ones was a digital agency, actually. So we partnered up with a digital agency who, again, they had, you know, great software engineers who were brilliant and doing project-based work, and projects had come to an end, and there was kind of nothing to fill the next sort of 3 to 6 months. And you know, the way that we work, obviously, you know, we're building this scalable platform, but we're very hands-on at the minute, and we want to make sure that kind of every stakeholder, I suppose, but everyone's kind of a customer, has a really good experience. So obviously got them uploaded onto the website, but we did a little interview, a little sort of meet and greet with the engineer, made sure that, you know, we understood what they wanted to get out of the secondment, what their kind of development priorities were, what they really liked doing, you know, the sort of style of work, the culture of work they might be interested in. We went pretty deep actually, and Dave's, you know, HR knowledge was incredibly useful for that. And then went out to our kind of startup network and found a small startup for them to essentially be placed for 3 months. And all the secondments we placed have so far been positive, which is great. And we'll definitely have a mix of outcomes, but I think, you know, certainly being very hands-on at this stage and making sure that no one feels like they've just been chucked a new resource or they've been kind of offloaded to another company, and everyone kind of feels looked after. You know, that's something that at our scale, at our early stage, we can do. And we can just really spend time hand-holding everyone. And that's, well, it's super rewarding for us. And probably not too annoying for the candidates either.
You've covered some of the journey there, but just for folks listening to this, I'm just thinking about what is the process. So I've been told I'm available for secondment. I don't know how that bit particularly works. I'm assuming that's kind of, we'd highlight, hey, that like we're gonna put you into Ditto for a secondment. You got like talk to me about the journey for the people that go into the platform. What is that like?
Yeah, so I mean, currently what we do is we get either the candidate themselves or their manager to essentially go onto the platform and write out a little profile. So not just the skills that they have now, at the time that they'll be available, all the kind of logistical stuff, but development areas, industries they're interested in, coding languages they have, that sort of granular level of detail. Once they're uploaded onto the platform, it's an anonymized profile, but certainly the information there is viewable by the other companies who we have onboarded onto the platform who are going to be looking for candidates for secondment. So that's always quite nice. It's sort of live from the moment they hit publish. But what we'll often do as well is, you know, there's a manual element of this, a sort of more sourcing element, I suppose, from an HR sense. So we'll hop on a call with the candidate, partly to just gather a little bit more insights about them, but also in kind of a larger way, just to really understand, you know, what they want from this secondment and to make them feel comfortable that they're in a safe pair of hands and that we're not going to put them somewhere where we don't think they're a good cultural match. And also just to explain to them, you know, if you know, there's a cooling off period, if in the first 2 weeks you're not having a good experience for whatever reason, you, the candidate, are allowed to stop the secondment. That's built in intentionally to stop it from being this sort of 6 months really bad experience.
Ticked off one of my questions. That's ticked off one of my downstream questions. It was definitely one that I was going to ask.
We often
just to finish that thread of just the journey. Once they're on the platform, we'll essentially go to the companies who are onboarded onto the platform and the companies who we've sort of vetted, who we know are looking for that sort of type of opportunity, float that profile around, and then it's essentially kind of a classic recruitment line of, they have an interview, if it's a good fit, then we'll handle the contract, set up the salary reimbursement, agree a start date, and then they can kick off. So that's the process. So yeah, over to you, Dave.
I was only gonna, I think you've covered it perfectly. I was gonna say it runs today and it won't, you know, we're obviously building, we're productizing the whole thing end to end, but it's a bit like an exec search process, right? Like we're a B2B business, but this focus on the employee and trying to really understand what is going to move the dial on their upskilling is super important. So it's really fun to sit with employees and have this meeting and say things like, what sector would you love to work in? It baffles people. It almost stumps people to go, do you really mean that? And when we say, yeah, if you say charities or if you say a climate tech startup or if you say a brand, we will go and talk to them, and the chances are that they're either already talking to us or they're signed up. So that's always extremely fun to be able to do. And to go right back to the beginning of all this, employees have to want to do this. Employers can't force their employees to do this, and we don't want that. Yeah, they're at the heart of everything we do. It's like a red carpet service for them, and we want to take all of those manual learnings and then build a beautiful product and a journey for them that gives them the same thing.
Basically, you're removing the risk from the sorry, it's strange to get out of the recruiting process of this. I was going to say applicant, then the person, the individual, the that's getting seconded, you're adding a little bit more kind of like, I'm in control of what happens next. Whereas with a job move, there is an element of like risk in doing so, because they say they're going to develop me, but quite often you might turn up and nothing happens. So I guess that's a good follow up there, right? It's like, what purpose is behind the product to ensure development of the individual? I'm enjoying it. It's a fun place to work. They've got a cool office, nice people. I'm not really learning. How are you tracking it? It seems like that's a really important part for you guys.
Yeah. So essentially the feedback loop shouldn't surprise you, I guess. Like we're always pulse checking with our secondees. Are you measurably moving the dial on the learning objective that we chatted about before you went on your secondment? And in the next iteration of the product, we're considering some really cool things like the employee reviewing the company that they're on secondment with to say, did they measurably help me think commercially, or work with ambiguity, or improve leadership, so that later on we'll be able to feed that back into the way that we think about matching and things. So yeah, it's firmly on the radar. We're primarily a tech platform that develops and upskills employees. Before we are a recruitment kind of solution or a provider of labor, then we do that, but it's not our core goal.
Who are you selling this to as well? Because you're touching so many different areas, L&D and TM and a bit of TA as well. Who's your actual go-to within the company, and finance as well, if you want to add another one?
Yeah, it's a real mix. Primarily dependent on sort of company size or industry. I mean, HRDs are a classic person who's not only very interested, but also an eventual gatekeeper. So, they're always someone who's kind of involved in the sales process. But for the smaller companies with maybe slightly, I guess, less mature HR functions and people functions, it's quite classic for us to go through either the COO or the CTO. CTO, just because often their whole role becomes hiring and managing their technical teams, and technical teams are kind of essentially where we're playing right now. It's very dependent on the company size, but tends to be CTOs and COOs. Yeah.
What about the market, the different types of companies? You finding the people who are the early adopters, are they more on the SME side, or are you seeing maybe potentially enterprise companies as well showing some interest?
So there are definitely a number of enterprise companies who are interested. A few have even sort of talked about us being part of their talent review cycle, which is obviously very exciting. We're quite young, so we're sort of mostly targeting the sort of sub 1,000 headcount, sub 500 headcount even, simply because just the uptake of tech is just going to be more rapid. Their risk appetite's a bit faster. They feel that burn of having people on the bench in a greater way, and also the burn of consulting contractor costs. But we're still in the procurement process for a few enterprise organizations. We'd love to be more of an enterprise solution, sort of an employee perk for really big organizations. It's just the length of the sales cycle is slightly different.
But I'd love to know more about, how does my company come to the platform and tell you what I want?
Yeah. So this is maybe my favorite question to answer. We are a marketplace because on one side of our marketplace, we effectively pay you to develop your talent. And on the other side, you get to access a brand new talent pool, temporary talent pool of permanently employed people. People often come to us with one of those in mind. They will either have a burning problem of not wanting to make redundancies, or really wanting to upskill an individual, or they will come to us and say, hey, we really need a software engineer from fintech. And it won't surprise you to know that we're kind of doubling down on the first example of people with employees they'd love to develop and retain. And then they realize, quite literally, when you log in, you get presented with these two options, these very two different menus. So everybody has their own reason for joining. They often quite quickly realize the other one is quite cool as well. So we're not strictly a two-sided marketplace in that sense, because you can do as much or as little of either loaning or borrowing. which is a huge benefit. But yeah, I think by the time people are talking to us, they have a very clear view on what they see the platform doing for them. They've normally heard from someone in their network or through us being rather loud on LinkedIn about the benefits and the thing we're trying to drive. But yeah, happy to dive in on any of the experience points.
Darren, as a larger business, is there any view?
I would have seen that a year ago, 18 months ago, they started laying off a lot of people. And within the last 3-4 months, I've seen the same people actually go back and boomerang back. If you go back to, say, their position 12, 18 months ago, what's the process for them? If their disc was around, you were more mature, what would that look like?
Yeah. So in the instance of their tabling cost-driven redundancies and cost-driven redundancies that they know to be regrettable, which mind-bogglingly is like 25% of all redundancies that are happening today will be rehired within 12 months. What normally happens is they will either have a single individual or a group of people that they have identified in this population. At that point, they can upload, as Hector said, the core information about those individuals, and then we will essentially take over and meet and understand what is going to move the dial for them on development and sector and preferences, and begin the matching process.
They could set timelines. For example, we spoke about obviously 12 months, 25%.
Yeah.
Could they say, look, it's going to be 12 months? Could they extend it as well? So the market, we assume, everyone's very optimistic.
Do we assume Meta know that they're going to hire these people back?
I think you have to.
Yeah.
Right. I think so. But on the extension point, you could not know in what time frame, and actually those time frames might not naturally align. So and that's okay. You can extend the secondment. You can move from one secondment to another secondment. But I think for a company to be tabling us, they probably have come to the realization that not only are they making redundancies, but these feel like regrettable redundancies that they would like to avoid. The other really we talk a lot about redundancies, but for an enterprise, baking us into the talent review process and, taking a slice of people that maybe aren't quite in the top right corner, but are really, really close and need to close some skills, or decide to offer it as a work perk to people hitting 3-year tenure, because at 5 years you get to go and walk along the beach in Bali, but how many people get to 5 years? What about if you offered a secondment at 3 that was cost neutral, and suddenly your proposition to Gen Z is, hey, go work for that passion, that sector that you're super passionate about for 3 months, and then come back.
That's a real big market there, because a lot of the issues around graduate rotation programs is they do 2 years, and I think it's something like 25%, 30% maybe will leave after 2-3 years, and each company will look at them and say, that they can't see the opportunities, they can't see the growth, but realistically they want to go and experience something else. Or you're 20 years old trying to determine what you're going to do the rest of your life, and you start doing you're gonna make a decision, you're gonna work and realize this isn't for me potentially, and you need to go and see something else. And then hopefully that realization is actually it was great where I originally started.
Or at the other end, same vibe, right? You mentioned that you also can take people on fractionally. It's like, I've got to turn this feature off. I've got to turn this feature off. You mentioned that folks can go fractionally as well, right? To add to Darren's point there, it's like at the end of my career, I want more purpose. When my time's running out, I want to just I want to go and have an impact at a charity and use all the stuff I've learned from Meta. Just take the example.
I think that group of people. Go for it.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say that the fractional use case is really interesting, and I think we see that more and more, particularly with sort of very senior people at startups or companies that are in that space, where they don't necessarily need someone full time in that role, and they want to go and have an impact at a charity. And I think that it's sort of a refreshing bit of work for them to go and work somewhere else for 2 days a week for 3 months or something like that. And it also allows, they're normally quite expensive people, so it allows access to really, really skilled, very senior people at a lower cost. It's 2 days a week. You might not need someone full time for whatever your business is doing, or particularly for a charity. So yeah, it's definitely a good. It's definitely an interesting angle for us in terms of how we could expand, and the sort of graduate level as well. I mean, I think lots of people have done grad schemes that have been less rotational than they expected them to be, or perhaps they've been rotated into kind of not massively interesting, inspiring things. So they get to the end of the grad scheme, they've ticked the 2 years or the 3 years, and then they just go. But if you could have rotations into other organizations, and this could be a perk which doesn't just sit in the grad scheme, but is something that you get access to maybe every 2 years, you get 3 months, or whatever line you need to draw to just increase that retention. I think you see greater retention and certainly greater employee satisfaction across the board. It's just at what points you input that, essentially.
Is it too early for us to ask if you've got that data yet, you guys? Are you starting to see like folks that have been on site staying longer?
I think, yeah, I mean, we don't have that data set yet purely because, we started 8 months ago, and those the most powerful metrics for us are going to be how many of our secondees went home and got promoted, and how many or changed jobs and otherwise wouldn't have, and how many of them are still in the business in, a year or 2 years' time. That will be the real quality measuring metric for us. So we don't have it yet, but I think one definite signal is that employees feel so almost privileged in a way that their employee is willing to do this. And the message it sends is, we'll never have to table not being able to give you development or having to make cost-driven redundancies. In theory, we'll never have to do that because we're engaged with Ditto, which is a really cool signal, I think, to send to employees.
I see companies as well kind of having alignment, like where you've sent employees to a certain company. And
Yeah, both
they've
ways.
done really well, come back, and I'm thinking, like, if you've that company's actually quite good, having that sort of cross kind of relationship.
Yeah. I think that's where we're going. I think the future of work, which is a massively overused phrase, but I think the proposition companies will have to make to employees is not going to be come and work here because this is what a career at this business looks like. It's going to be come and work here because this is the external talent cloud, the external talent partnerships that we're engaged in that you also unlock when coming here. I don't think it comes back to our kind of core, the reason we got on so well when we first met. We've all experienced career variety and understood the power of that upskilling. So many companies we talk to can't do this for their employees. They are too small. They can't afford to create jobs to give employees to kind of have a go at. So what we're trying to do is level that playing field for those organizations and say, everyone, I mean, we're going to pay you to develop your employees. Anyone in theory can do external talent mobility. And we're really excited about giving those smaller companies a really powerful retention option.
But you're in theory, you're saying you as an employee in the future are going to be like an academy. You're going to come here and you're going to upskill, and you allow you to sort of potentially be, go to other places. But over time, I want to keep you for that duration, and hopefully see you progress, to the elite level. That's what you're looking for. Isn't that the future of work? I could keep going on, by the way. There's so much the future and the vision.
Using
as well.
the football analogy again.
It's fantastic. I'd love to hear, like, we're in the shared economy with Airbnb and WeWork and have done so well. What's your ultimate vision for Ditto?
I mean, who's going first, Hector? It's a good question.
I can take a punt. I mean, so I think when we started, we understood the need to be really focused, to look at a very specific vertical and a very specific skill set, and also to keep it geographically specific just with our understanding of employment law and the things that we have access to. I think the ultimate goal is a platform that's almost as ubiquitous as something like Upwork or Fiverr, where it doesn't matter what geography you're in, you can log on as a company and you can essentially browse candidates and browse opportunities for your staff. And similarly, as an employee, you can log on and see secondment opportunities, not just, tech talent in London, which is obviously our primary focus today, but secondments internationally around the world in a variety of different industries that I guess give you exposure to different learning opportunities that maybe you don't get in the particular place you're in. And I think that it's the sort of thing that grows sort of exponentially, good with scale. Like the more geographies, the more industries, the wider the breadth of it, the more you could be a software engineer for a company in Romania that is in a totally different industry, and the skills that you would gather there could be incredible. We have seen examples of sort of cross-border secondments before. Specifically, the NCA has seconded people from like Eastern European police forces to support them with specific types of investigation. So like that sort of, you could imagine that being incredibly valuable for everyone involved. Just the sort of cross-pollination of ideas and skills and, tools that you're using. And in a very sort of grand way, that's sort of what we'd like to be building internationally, essentially.
Yeah,
So
I think
stuff down, Dave.
I think Hector always gives really good concrete answers, and then I'll come in with kind of an area, kind of ethereal answer to the question. So he keeps me grounded, which is great. I was going to say, I think we recognize that sort of the permanent career path, which used to mean exactly what it says on the tin, is not that anymore. And we want to, in a way, rebuild the permanent career path for people that, don't want to be a gig worker and aren't brave enough to maybe be a freelancer, but are really up for career variety. So rebuild the permanent career path, or have some say in what that future shape looks like, and to rethink the talent development model, right? Like to say that we're going to pay a company what has been a historically fixed cost to develop and retain employees is a pretty big claim, but we're doing it, and we'd love to do it, kind of as Hector says, ubiquitously and all around the world. And then the final thing, and I think Suzy would say this one, is to democratize career variety and the opportunity to upskill is the third pillar, I think, to our answer.
Jeez, some big like they're not claims, are they? Because you're clearly on a path already that seems like you're solving this problem. Like we hear a lot of big claims, right, Darren, on the show here for people that want to change the way we work, or change the way we do work, or change the way we hire. But often they're on a path where they're like 40 steps away from that. Whereas you guys have built something that is super new, challenging a norm, and we're actually able to do now, which is, I'm not allowed to swear, but cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
Which I think is really cool. What's the next big thing you're aiming at so that we can see the path?
Go.
Yeah. So I mean, this year is very, very focused on like tech talent. So making sure that we really nail the UK tech talent market, be that product managers, data scientists, etc. And I think slowly creeping up our company size. So just increasing the size of company that we target towards enterprise at the very least. Yes, large comments, exactly.
Sorry, you meant the companies you target. Not
in any other way. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, no, I think we would like to run some experiments, some sort of sales experiments to understand what other industries, and particularly what other skill sets might be quite interesting to expand into. It's hard to say concretely. We're very much still understanding the scale of this thing. So that's I think what's going to be next for us.
Do you know, I just find myself saying the same thing as Hector. I think we want to kick into the next phase of growth. We're very close to kind of finishing off our next round of investment, which is extremely cool and very fun. And we've got some amazing people coming in.
Awesome.
That will change everything for us again. So we're just being very cautious and really focusing on executing, following the data and the signals that we know are there, and not letting ourselves be distracted. As I think even in this call, you can see this model pre-exists and it's really powerful, but the challenge, the success of it will be on our ability to execute in the best possible way, and say no to as many things as we say yes to. So, I mean, Hector's an absolute master of this. And I think we're doing a pretty good job so far. So just more of the same.
Excellent. And our final question before we end today's show, I want at least one from both of you, is what other tools in the space, doesn't have to be your space, it can be any space, but in the TA and HR world, are you super impressed with right now?
I'll happily go first. So it is in the talent acquisition space. I would say, broadly speaking, we've seen the emergence of recruiter enablement, and I think there's going to be a lot of bells and whistles around this category. But there are clearly a few players who in recent months have kind of come out with a very open door, pragmatic solution that genuinely solves problems for recruiters day to day, right? Really in a tangible way. If I have to name some, I think Pop AI and Sam Desi and co are doing a really, really good job. And I think Adam Gordon is often referred to as a man on a mission. He is a man on a mission, and what they're doing at Poetry is also very cool. So I just think, broadly speaking, that category is cool to watch.
Awesome. Yeah, both a guest downstream, Darren, Pop coming on, and we've had Adam on. Great shows. One we're looking forward to. Hector.
Yeah, so I did have a little think about this. So I definitely like what Humaneer are doing. I don't know if you've heard of Humaneer,
No.
Kimberly. They're essentially building kind of toolkits for HR team individuals, so that they can do their jobs more efficiently and do their jobs, in a sort of more supported way. And then I think on the sort of more hiring side, I thought IV Jobs looked really cool. We saw a pitch from them through something we were going through a few weeks ago. Very much a different understanding of, how to strip data out of job descriptions to encourage people who wouldn't normally apply to jobs to apply, particularly with sort of returning to work mothers and things like that. So I thought that was a very interesting spin on how powerful a job board could be. So Ivy is definitely worth looking up. I was very impressed by their founders as well.
Two things before we let you go there that we've got to point out. Hector, we need to get those URLs from you, please, because I want to make sure that we're running invites to those guys. And second of all, I really appreciate that they are in like a different space. And the final part is we didn't get to play MetaView Bingo today. We play MetaView Bingo on the show. Normally MetaView comes up as one of the core tools, so it's nice to get some refreshing opinions on it. That brings us to the end of today's show. We've absolutely loved this. You're first of all our first 3 guest attendees, so you win an award for that. It's been super fun. It's been fascinating to learn about what you guys want to achieve and where you're going with the product and unpacking it a little bit. So if you're listening to this, don't forget to check out the demo, which we'll make sure there's a link in description after this goes live. Thanks everyone for coming on today. Really appreciate it. And that's us signing off.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thanks for having us. Cheers.